With that warm-up, may I invite the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Defence of Thailand to address this dialogue. Thank you, sir.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is a distinct honor to present Thailand's perspective on the topic of cross-regional security interlinkages. Two days ago, we have listened to opinion and exchange of information, an issue that lies at the very core of our current global affairs. As I mentioned, this lies at the very core of the 21st century global affairs, where the boundaries of geography no longer limit the reach of emerging threats. Thailand firmly believes that true security in the modern era must be founded upon cooperation rather than military rivalry, through partnership rather than polarity or unilateral approaches to security. While the concept of cross-regional security interlinkages is frequently discussed in today's world, its fundamental principles are not new. Nation-states, including Thailand, have long understood the importance of forging partnerships across borders in order to adapt to change, protect their sovereignty, and uphold internal stability. Over a century ago, His Majesty King Julajomklao laid the groundwork for regional security through diplomacy and broad-based cooperation that connected multiple regions, an approach that continues to inspire and guide Thailand's policies to this day. Thailand remains steadfast in our support for a rules-based international order, respect for sovereignty, and inclusive engagement by all stakeholders. Amid the growing landscape of transboundary security challenges, including transnational crime, terrorism, and weapons of mass destruction proliferation, to emerging technologies like cyber, space, artificial intelligence, and underwater operations. No region is immune. Addressing these complexities requires tangible and continuous cross-regional collaborative efforts. As security and economic dynamics become increasingly interconnected, global and cross-regional initiatives such as the Indo-Pacific strategies and the Belt and Road Initiative, as well as unilateral security mechanisms like the Quad and AUKUS, all play vital roles in fostering long-term stability and sustainable development. Thailand stands firmly in support of constructive and transparent collaboration within this framework to encourage cooperation rather than geopolitical division. Over the past 2 days, I have listened with great respect to the valuable insights shared by my fellow ministers, and I wish to reaffirm Thailand's commitment to addressing emerging threats that undermine regional stability. These challenges must be recognized and embedded in concrete frameworks of cross-regional security cooperation. including clear and effective strategy for deterrence and response in light of diverse security threats that extend far beyond the traditional military domain, encompassing critical areas such as food, energy, and communications. There is an urgent need to enhance the resilience of critical infrastructure, which serves as a foundation for our economic, societies, and comprehensive development. One pressing concern is the protection of undersea infrastructure, which remains vulnerable to physical attacks, sabotage, and natural disasters. Disruption in this domain carry far-reaching consequences for regional economies and security. In this regard, Thailand, together with Singapore and Brunei Darussalam, has proposed that the ADMM drive forward urgent cooperation in this area. Another key challenge is the responsible development and use of AI grounded in ethics and good governance, which should serve the cause of peace and security in both civilian and defense contexts. Recognizing AI's potential and risks in the security domain presents both an opportunity and a shared challenge that must be addressed through policy-level collaboration. The military use of AI must be pursued with utmost responsibility, fully aligned with international law and established norms of governance. Thailand stands ready to collaborate with all partners in building sustainable cross-regional security and effectively addressing emerging threats. We propose strengthening medical cooperation across regions, with a particular emphasis on disaster response, an area that directly affects regional stability. As the host of the ASEAN Center of Military Medicine, a key regional mechanism for humanitarian and medical cooperation, Thailand is prepared to work alongside Indo-Pacific and African countries to establish a lasting and robust network of collaboration in this important field. Distinguished guests, as threats become increasingly complex and rapidly evolving, national stability can only be achieved through robust security networks, both within and across regions. This principle is more critical than ever in a world fraught with turbulence and conflicts. Multilateralism is not a relic of the past. It remains essential for collective stability. A security architecture that is open, inclusive, and non-discriminatory is the key to effective cross-regional collaboration against new era threats. Thailand firmly believes that the United Nations Pact for the Future embodies a shared global commitment to advancing cross-regional cooperation in addressing common challenges ahead. It empowers all nations to responsibly shape our collective destiny. The foundations we lay today will bring this vision to life, both regionally and globally. In preparing for an increasingly complex world, we need for stronger cross-regional partnerships has never been greater. We must move beyond the concept of isolating regions and instead foster a network of regions and a network of partnerships that are strong, resilient, and reliable. The security architecture we seek must be inclusive, rules-based, and multilateral, enabling all countries to participate and share responsibility. The Shangri-La Dialogue and ASEAN-led mechanisms are clear examples of this inclusive approach. In this context, ASEAN is not just a regional grouping. It serves as a vital platform for inclusive cross-regional cooperation, as articulated in the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. This vision aims to enhance collective security and promote sustainable development based on shared interests, and enhance cross-regional connectivity in all dimensions through ASEAN-led mechanisms to ensure comprehensive regional governance. As a founding member of ASEAN, Thailand remains committed to an outward-looking policy and the principle of ASEAN centrality. We believe ASEAN can act as a strategic link between regions, addressing global challenges and advancing a secure and sustainable future. With their distinctive characteristics, the ADMM and ADMM Plus mechanisms serve as crucial platforms to enhance mutual trust, capacity building, and cooperation with external partners beyond the region through practical activities and continuous exchanges of best practices and expertise. Thailand actively engages in multilateral security efforts, including long-standing UN peacekeeping deployments, hosting the Cobra Goal exercise, one of the world's largest multinational military drills, participating in Talisman Sabre 2025 in Australia, and the proactive role of the Royal Thai Navy in maritime security domain. Thailand's chairmanship of BIMSTEC from 2022 to 2025 seeks to bridge South and Southeast Asia, enabling BIMSTEC to realize its full potential and establishing Thailand as a gateway linking regions toward future stability. All these efforts are vital investment in our shared security and the future we shall build together. Distinguished guests, in an increasingly complex and volatile world, no nation can secure its future alone. It is friendship and cross-regional cooperation that will propel us through crisis, lay the foundation for tomorrow, and chart a sustainable path forward. By embracing openness and respect for rules, we must ask ourselves, what future do we choose? One of unity or division? In closing, I wish to emphasize that building cross-regional security interlinkages requires joint efforts across three key dimensions. First, political connectivity through mutual trust and respect for sovereignty. Second, economic connectivity to share opportunities and foster mutual prosperity. And third, security connectivity to strengthen our collective capacity to address cross-regional threats. If we pursue these principles with genuine commitment, we will lay a solid foundation for a stable, inclusive, and sustainable region, a shared legacy we can proudly pass on to our future generations. Thank you.
ท่านรองนายกรัฐมนตรี
underlying three specific areas for cooperation. You called for more ADMM cooperation to deal with protecting critical infrastructure, especially undersea. You also called for building norms to ensure responsible use of AI in the military domain, and you also called for the better coordination of disaster response and humanitarian relief, and mentioned a region that hasn't yet been mentioned in this dialogue, which is Africa. So those three contributions were very important to us, and we'll be able to discuss further shortly. Dovile, the floor is yours.
Dear organizers, distinguished guests, thank you for having me here. I think that this format is exceptionally important because this is a format of defense ministers. And during one of my meetings yesterday, one of my colleagues commented that this is not a meeting of foreign affairs ministers, this is not a meeting of trade ministers, this is a meeting of defense ministers. We do have quite a tough responsibility on our shoulders. And we are facing quite unprecedented challenges today, even though this time for many of you in this region doesn't seem maybe too different from what you've been experiencing for decades as well, but we do have a different situation. We are basically facing a point of transition which is bringing us quite close to a possible point of no return. And therefore, I think that we deserve to be very straightforward and honest with each other. Anyhow, we are supposed to understand and support each other because none of us would like to take responsibility before our nations to have failed when we could have found a solution. And for decades, we have told ourselves a very comforting story that undemocratic and free countries would eventually become a part of a free world if only we welcomed them and showed them the way. Because, I mean, we are very good at showing the way, aren't we? And we believe that economic deals and polite cooperation would somehow lead them to freedom. We believe that we should choose our way of life as it's the best there is. And it was a beautiful illusion. Arrogance usually leads to illusions and breakdown of illusions. And while we blindfolded ourselves with fantasy, the world was moving quite the other direction. Wars were breaking out all the time. I mean, someone was writing books about the world after the end of all wars. I wonder, that probably was not really true. Authoritarian regimes gained strength and profits were put before principles. And free trade did not spread freedom. It empowered dictators, sometimes with our help. Too many free nations became hooked on cheap energy, and we do know that in Europe, definitely, and easy money from regimes that will never share our values. Now we face the hard truth that putting money over morality has brought us to a dangerous place. If money is not backed by hard principles and military muscle, then polite demeanor is taken for weakness and adherence to rules as simple stupidity. Moreover, the inability to enforce those rules upon those who keep breaking them, even in our own homes, shattered our illusions of power and enraged our societies. And that huge wave of radicalism is also our own doing, isn't it? Those we consider inferior to us, authoritarian regimes, they do not hold our standards in high esteem and are quite busy overtaking the world by actual brutal power. Invasions, hybrid warfare. One of examples is also these attacks against critical underwater infrastructure. A lot of very similar accidents, so similar to the last detail. Coercion, blackmail, and the oldest tool in the box, corruption. International rules-based order only means something if you actually do enforce the rules. And even though democracies combined possess huge military power, not only economic, but actually military power, this is not enough. It's also important that this message and that this power is seen and heard and employed when necessary. Mistakes can be based on miscalculations as well, including assuming that Europe or NATO as a whole would be too slow, or that internal challenges many of us, including US, are facing would prevent a well-coordinated, hard response to violation of our land. Misconceptions about our capabilities or our red lines are no less dangerous than lack of actual resources. I have no doubt that every honorable guest in this hall perfectly understands what's currently at stake. Therefore, we must ensure not only a rapid rise in our military capabilities, because they are not enough, but also sending a very clear message of immediate and forceful response that will be inevitable if anyone dares to violate us. And the convergence of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea into an increasingly coordinated authoritarian axis, let's put it diplomatically, demands an equally unified response by us. We should not mix being polite with lacking strength. And in this context, United States' strategic focus on Indo-Pacific is both justified and necessary. But this is not America's responsibility alone, and I'm very glad to hear that so many of us here agree that we do have to work together. Because if even more coordinated action by those, let's diplomatically call them authoritarian regimes, were to take place, it will complicate global stability for decades. It has a potential to break down the current economy so that it will not be restored, as experts have wonderfully calculated, and thank you for doing that great job. And meanwhile, a safe and stable Indo-Pacific and a strong Europe can provide vital support to US in our joint effort to prevent the next war and hopefully to make an effective end to the current one in Ukraine. Let's be clear, if Russia prevails in Ukraine, it's not about Europe. It's not about one region. It will send a very clear signal also to smaller states here in Indo-Pacific that anyone can ignore their borders, that any fabricated excuse can justify invasion, well, or the usual harassment. And in such a world, if nations are left to fend for themselves, it's not going to end well. And history usually does not repeat, but certain fragments usually come back. And we cannot let this happen. In these times of uncertainty, I believe that our ability to weave a tightly knit network of allies and partners from Europe to Indo-Pacific based on fair burden sharing and defense of joint interests against common threats is crucial. I think we can sort of compensate those vibrations of complicated narratives that we face every day when we open social media. And to respond to growing new geopolitical reality challenges, just days ago, I signed Lithuania's MOD Indo-Pacific strategy, and actually I'm really happy with that. We are a small state, but we do have something to offer, and as one of my wonderful colleagues said here, being small does not mean being insignificant, especially where there is a lot of such small ones like us. And we believe in concrete action and building mutually beneficial alliances with countries facing the same threats and willing to join talent, ambition, and resources. Our engagement in Indo-Pacific is driven by three principles. First, prioritizing areas where Lithuania's specialized capabilities, such as cyber defense and hybrid threat resilience, can have the greatest impact, and we are happy to share and work together, including with Taiwan, and we're going to continue. Second, aligning our activities with EU, NATO, and US frameworks to ensure coherence and strength in numbers and effects. And three, building relationships that deliver security dividends to all parties involved. Moreover, we have launched a new legislative package creating lucrative green corridors for defense industry because, well, I believe it was really good phrase said yesterday. No strategy works without logistics, right? So we allocated funding to enable urgent joint action with like-minded nations, including our Indo-Pacific partners. We are really welcoming them into working with us. both bilaterally and through the Piper Initiative. And by the way, we do mean business. This year, Lithuania's GDP for defense is 4%. And next year, it's going to be around 5.5. And the financial planning is to have it for at least 5 years, till from 2026 till 2030, between 5 and 6% GDP annually. We determined to ourselves that we need to be armed to the teeth, and we need to eliminate any obstacles, including bureaucracy. Murdering bureaucracy is something that we are doing, I think, quite successfully. There can be no more uncertainty and no more excuses. And dear colleagues and friends, we can build a very resilient network. We've seen a lot. Many of you have seen much more than me. I do have a very clear memory of what my family has experienced when we were last time occupied by Russian Empire. And I do not want that to be repeated. I know that you also live next to Russian Empire, next to Chinese Empire, and we are also breathing down our necks every single day. And it's up to us to withstand, because we can. Sometimes we just need to be a little bit tougher, maybe less polite, keep the rules, and enforce those rules. And in my opinion, we can and we will retain our way of life. Our resolve must be heard, and nothing amplifies the sound of resolve better than hard and visible power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might summarize only a very small part of those remarks by confirming that I think you said that cross-regional cooperation requires, first of all, a shared understanding and then a shared strategic empathy. And for giving us your perspective from Lithuania, we're all very grateful. Gilberto, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning. I think it would not do justice to the organizers if I did not share with you the takeaways I have formulated from this significant conference. First, cross-regional is not only necessary, but vital. Second, for cross-regional security linkages to be sustainable, you need firm international, global governance and architecture. Fourth, there is a common understanding of the individual, regional, and common threats and challenges that we all face, being security practitioners. And fourth, there are major players that uphold and are significant pillars of the international global rules-based order. And disengagement by any of them would be disastrous for the preservation of peace in areas where there is a condition of peace, and conflict resolution in areas where there is conflict. So I echo the Deputy Prime Minister's words and Dobile's words that we are all interconnected and we must advocate and use our leadership in order to foster connectivity, call out bad behavior, and work together towards working for tangible outcomes in all our talks, as our host, Minister Chan, said. I'll now proceed. In last year's dialogue, President Ferdinand R. Marcos delivered a historic keynote address where he spoke in defense of the rules-based international order. As he aptly put it, for the past 80 years, This rules-based order has allowed our region to flourish. The stability and predictability that it has engendered have been crucial to the success of the stories of our region, be it the post-war revival of Japan, the economic miracles of Korea and in Southeast Asia, or the rise of China and of India. His words are more relevant in this conference today, following the speeches of President Macron and of Secretary Hegseth. However, we are witnessing the reconfiguration of our global environment, including the political and economic arrangements that emerged after the Second World War. In our interdependent world, ruptures in the international system, wherever they occur, threaten the very security and prosperity of our people. Thus, this topic, it is an honor for me to address. In an era marked by uncertainty, the diffusion of power, and technological disruption, no single region can be viewed in isolation. From the Indo-Pacific to Eastern Europe, from the Middle East to the Arctic, today's security environment is shaped by interlocking dynamics that transcend traditional regional boundaries. Over the last decade, several cross-regional trends have impacted the security of the Philippines and the outlook of Southeast Asia. In 1974, Deng Xiaoping told the UN General Assembly, and I quote, that China is not a superpower, nor will she ever seek to be one, unquote. Over half a century later, it is evident that the Chinese government did not honor Deng Xiaoping's commitment. And the strategic competition between China and the United States increasingly defines our regional, global security environment. However, we must not overemphasize this reality. Doing so unfairly portrays the legitimate actions taken by smaller states, carried out as being carried out at the behest of major powers, as if we were mere pawns with no strategic agency of our own. In that spirit, I would like to reiterate that the Philippine position on the West Philippine Sea is not a function of Sino-American strategic rivalry. Instead, it is caused, no doubt, by the overreach of the Chinese Communist Party, of which the most glaring evidence is the 9, 10, or 11 dash line that has absolutely no basis in international law. Russia's actions in Ukraine and Israel's operation in Gaza have rippled across the commodity and energy markets of Asia. Hence, the consequences of conflicts abroad are felt at home and borne disproportionately by the most vulnerable. Increases in the cost of food affect cash-strapped families, worsening poverty and food insecurity. Spikes in fuel prices impact critical sectors such as agriculture, domestic shipping, and manufacturing. In this context, multilateral institutions have been facing unprecedented scrutiny and at times met with skepticism and frustration for their difficulties in defending international peace and security. The mechanisms and norms of the United Nations have been used to block legitimate measures aimed at preventing acts of aggression and restoring regional order. This highlights the need for a Security Council that is fit for purpose, for contemporary geopolitical realities. We have seen an evolution from rigid alliance blocks to flexible issue and needs-based groupings. The shift is exemplified by the Quad, the Security Quad, the AUKUS, as well as the European Union and its outreach to the Indo-Pacific. Such frameworks link geographically distant partners with shared strategic interests, including maritime security, cyber resilience, and the defense of the all-important supply chains. These developments are driven by gridlocks in the decision-making of multilateral organizations, their slow pace of reforms, and their perceived inability to promote cooperation on the most pressing issues confronting their members. Indeed, criticism has been leveled even against ASEAN for its muted response to the illegal activities in the South China Sea. The Bab el-Mandeb, Suez Canal, and the South China Sea issues, to name a few, are not just regional. They are arteries of the global economy. Disruption in any of these maritime corridors triggers ripple effects across continents, impacting trade flows, military deployments, and diplomatic posture. The Philippines has migration and mobility linkages in these choke points. Over 1 million Filipinos are living and working in the Middle East and North Africa. Thus, instability in those regions pose risks to their lives, their safety and livelihoods. Our seafarers, in particular, are vulnerable to piracy and armed robbery at sea, be it in the Red Sea or in the Horn of Africa. Therefore, the safety of our citizens, wherever they may be, is among our utmost priorities. Technological development signifies progress, undoubtedly. However, technologies are merely tools. While they should be a force for good, they can also be exploited by malevolent actors. Thus, cyber operations launched in one hemisphere may and do paralyze infrastructure in another. Disinformation campaigns originating in one region may shape electoral outcomes in a completely different theater. Damage to submarine cables and other critical underwater infrastructure in one area may affect millions across the world. However, despite the recognized importance of these issues, response has been undoubtedly and undeniably slow. Legal and normative gaps are widening, whether in the enforcement of cyber legislation, the protection of critical underwater infrastructure, the regulation of artificial intelligence, or the issue of lethal autonomous weapons systems. The development and, yes, enforcement, more importantly, the enforcement of international legal frameworks lag behind the pace of innovation, adoption, and adaptation. Overall, these cross-regional trends feed into the reconfiguration of our geopolitical landscape, which is shaped not by lines drawn on a map, but by the flows of power, influence, technology, and information. To think regionally is no longer sufficient, but to act globally without understanding local contexts is equally dangerous. Thus, regional organizations, including ASEAN, have been struggling to align with extra-regional actors on common priorities. Coordination across different political systems and strategic cultures is increasingly difficult, with failure to gain consensus being a norm rather than an exception. This engenders concern about the unity and effectiveness and continued relevance of our multilateral institutions. In this light, I humbly propose some recommendations as a suggested collective way forward. Of course, we must enhance cross-regional security cooperation. Among the concrete measures we can take are joint strategic dialogues, such as trilateral or quadrilateral summits among regional blocs on shared security concerns. To this end, ASEAN must definitely strengthen and leverage its dialogue partnerships, including those with the European Union and the Gulf Cooperation Council. Another potential area of convergence is the development of shared legal frameworks and cooperative enforcement. This includes the promotion of international conventions and regional alignment on laws protecting critical infrastructure, such as submarine cables. Second, we must pursue reforms in the United Nations. There is a need to curtail the use of the inordinate use of the veto, as its exercise may serve to be a hindrance to the interests of smaller states, especially those besieged by larger ones, who may have the power of the veto. Beyond the veto, we support broader reforms to the Security Council, including enlarging its membership for greater representation in the UN system. For our part, we will continue advocating for constructive solutions if the Philippines is elected as a non-permanent member for the term of 2027 to 2028. President Xi Jinping has declared that, quote, China must lead the reform of the global governance system with concepts of fairness and justice, unquote. However, what the Chinese government considers fair and just may stand in stark contrast to the norms and values accepted by the rest of the world, especially the smaller countries. To envision a China-led international order, we only need to look at how they treat their much smaller neighbors in the South China Sea, which runs counter to the, quote, peaceful rise they, unquote, they initially promised. Last year, the Philippines hosted the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction with delegations from nearly 70 countries, including those from Europe, the Middle East, the North America, and South America. This demonstrates that in certain issues, the international community can still and do come back together to tackle challenges that respect neither borders nor boundaries. So there is hope. Just last month, we attended the UN Peacekeeping Ministerial, where we pledged to increase our contributions to peacekeeping missions to foster just and sustainable peace across the world. Ultimately, multilateral solutions are required to address global challenges, including climate change, nuclear non-proliferation, and the protection of the rights of migrants and seafarers. Thus, amidst a growing disillusionment, some sectors with multilateralism, we can and we must reverse course. Before I close, there is an issue we need to address. We are all here as stewards of our country's provenance and our country's collective responsibility towards maintaining global peace and security. I was just talking to future youth leaders. However, we must realize that the gap between the educated and the uneducated is widening in the world. And countries need to address this gap because a populace which is unable to perceive the benefits of multilateralism, that lose the facility of critical thinking, are easy bait for one-liners, disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda, which may run counter to general peace and stability of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the midst of a global transformation. Still, we must ensure that our international system, however it evolves, remains grounded in the rule of law, the undistorted rule of law, particularly the United Nations Charter, which respects the political independence, territorial integrity, and notional sovereign equality of all states. Evidently, this system has not always functioned well. However, for all its shortcomings, there is no preferable alternative to the rules-based order, especially for the security, prosperity, and survival of smaller states like the Philippines. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you for delivering the third powerful speech of this morning's plenary. I took away 3 sentences of my own by way of conclusion. 1, small power agency is not a derivative of great power rivalry. 2nd, functional frameworks are needed to link the geographically separate. And 3rd, legal and normative gaps are widening, so international law, indeed the rules-based order, needs to be modernized in order to cope with the new technologies that are interrupting our strategic life. Thank you very much. We'll now move to questions and comments from the floor. Remember the 2-stage step, the badge in, the button on. I'll take 8 or 9 and then come back to the panel, and we'll begin with a young leader from Thailand, Surachatri Suriyai.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions, if you would allow. One is for the Secretary and one is for the Thai DPM. Mr. Secretary Teodoro, as promised, I'm asking this question in the big room. So in 6 months or so, the Philippines will become the ASEAN chair. So what will be the top 3 priorities of the Philippines as the ASEAN chair? And how is the Philippines planning to reconcile the subtle but quite evident issue cleavage between the mainland Southeast Asia and the maritime Southeast Asia? For DPM Phumtham, Thailand's long-held doctrine in cultivating partnership is that we can be friends with everyone and everyone wants to be our friend. In the current polarizing geopolitical landscape and also in the middle of superpower competition, do you think that this doctrine is still working well for Thailand's economic and security prospects, given that President Xi's Southeast Asian visit last month did not include Thailand? And the most recent US presidential visit to Thailand was President Obama over a decade ago. ขอบคุณค่ะ
Thank you very much. And from Japan, Ryo Aizawa.
Thank you very much. So question to all of you about an adversarial cross-regional cooperation. How do you assess and deal with the growing cooperation among Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea? So especially in the case of China, why it emphasized its commitment to peaceful development or mutual respect or rules-based international order but in practice, we have seen actions neither peaceful, neither respectful, nor in line with international laws, from supporting to Russia to cutting off key dialogues. So if this type of things continues, wouldn't we have no choice but to see China as aligning with an axis that seeks to change the status quo by force. For instance, China and Russia in a regional crisis. So I'd love to hear your assessment and plans to deal with adversarial cooperation in this region. And please note that, distinguished panels, this question comes from the next generation inheriting this turbulent security environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And another from the next generation, from Malaysia, Fikri Rahman.
Thank you, Chair. This is to Thai's Deputy Prime Minister regarding Myanmar. I think Thai is a very important country to Myanmar. And Myanmar has been a conflict for transnational crime and so many other important issues, right? And I think Thai and China has worked together on the crackdown for the transnational crime. And we have numbers of special envoy from ASEAN, EU, UN, and Japan. So are Thailand exploring a more robust cooperation with countries like China and India on Myanmar and to complement ASEAN 5-point consensus? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from China, Qi Zhang.
Thank you, Dr. Chippen. My question is for Defense Minister of the Philippines. Recently, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the Russian-Ukraine war is a proxy war between nuclear powers and needs to be ended. And meanwhile, the United States is selling more arms to this region and setting up more military bases in the Philippines. So, if the proxy war in Europe needs to be ended, are you concerned that a proxy war in Asia might be launched? Thank you.
And also from China, Da Pengqi.
Thank you, moderator. First, it's a very brief comment. Actually, I really appreciate the viewpoint made by Deputy Prime Minister from Thailand. He said we should push forward cooperation and unity, not the division. So it is inappropriate for the minister from Lithuania to attach a label on China, and it's clear a rhetoric for division here in Asia. And my question is for the Philippine Secretary of Defense. As we know, both Vietnam and Malaysia have differences with China in South China Sea. Yet, both countries have effectively managed these differences with China. So my question is, why can't the Philippines do the same? And yesterday, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar mentioned he advised your president to engage dialogue and communication with China. So will the Philippines follow his advice and change its current approach to the South China Sea issue? Or does the Philippines intend to act as a proxy for external powers, continue to serve as a shadow in the shadow play, as described by Singapore former Defense Minister An Yong-hun at this year's Munich Security Conference? Thank you.
And from the IISS, Viraj Solanki.
Thank you, John. My question is for the Philippine Secretary of National Defense. You talked of the growing number of flexible and issue and needs-based groupings. And in March of this year, the Philippines Armed Forces Chief called for an expansion of the Squad Minilateral Group of the Philippines, US, Japan, and Australia to include India and South Korea. Does the Philippines still have an aim to expand this group to include these two countries or other countries across the Indo-Pacific region? And how do you see the objectives of this minilateral group expanding over time? Thank you.
And from Myanmar, Sumon Sant.
Thank you very much. My question is to DPM Thailand. Do you consider Myanmar military a viable partner to effectively tackle transitional crimes, or do you also consider working with local authorities, given scam centers operate in contested areas, for example?
And next, Bill Emmett.
Thank you, John. To add to the barrage of questions to Defense Minister Teodoro, I wonder if you could, in your answers to all these questions, give your current assessment of progress towards the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea and the degree to which your ASEAN partners are supportive of the Philippines' position and of achieving this.
Operate in contested areas, for example?
Not the division.